key players first, and then I'll kind of give you the thesis and my proposal. So first key player in our he joins the church in like 1831, and he's the first missionary to arrive into Western Maine, which the Newry, Oxford area. And he stays at Daniel Bean Sr.'s home. And Daniel Bean Sr., we'll see, is another key player as well. So in 1833, this guy, Horace Cowan, actually ends up as Daniel Bean Jr.'s mission companion in the Oxford Newry area.
Is it senior or relative or?
Yeah, we'll see that. So our next key player, we got a picture of over the Daniel Bean Sr. lived in Bethel, Oxford. His wife is Margaret Shaw. His parents are Jonathan Bean and Abigail Gordon, which is the key for the conversion. Sorry. His kids, so if you look at, you can see the slide, I'll have his kids. Ebenezer, Susanna, Anna, Sargent, Justice, Abaya, JB, who's probably a child that was born and died soon. Hadassah and Daniel Bean Jr., Mary, Dorothy, and Stephen. So then you have his son, Daniel Bean Jr. And actually, this picture is not on Family Search. I found this a couple of days ago through Ancestry.com through his descendants on one of their trees. This is Daniel Bean Jr. And important for our story is to know who his wife is. His wife, her name is Betsy Smith. And I actually had to update Family Search. She was not listed under her parents. So anyway, it kind of complicates the story a little bit. But he is one of the first known converts to the Latter-day Saint Christianity faith or Mormonism. He was baptized a week after Daniel Bean Sr. died. He gets baptized in March 1833 by Horace Cowan. So a month after, or a week after. So here's his wife, Betsy Smith. She's his wife, but she is also a Bean, and they're first cousins. Okay, so that kind of complicates it. But she is the daughter of Ethel Smith III and Anna Betsy Bean. So she's the granddaughter of Ethel Smith II, Hannah Gordon, Jonathan Bean, and Abigail Gordon. Now, if you can start to get a picture in your head, you got the Beans and the Gordons that are all intermarried, right? And the Smiths. And if you know at the bottom, she's an aunt to Lydia Smith, wife of Dominicus Carter. Okay. So then you have Lydia Smith. She was born in 1809, dies in Far West, Caldwell, Missouri. Wife of Dominicus. To me, she's a key player in this story. She's the daughter of Jonathan Smith and Lydia Brown. She's the granddaughter of Ethel Smith III and Anna Betsy Bean. She's the cousin to Daniel Bean Jr. She was a member of the Kirtland camp. They arrived in October 1838. She gave birth to a daughter, and a few days later, the mom comes in and kicks the Carters out of their home, and she flees to the woods. And she's exposed to the elements and dies a few days after that. Okay, so conversion. So here's really my thesis. If you take it from Dr. Richard Lyman Bushman, he made this comment about early converts to Mormonism. Quote, these early converts had in common a sympathy for visionary religion. Visionaries were a variant of a restless seeker population that wanted more religion than conventional Protestantism offered. Some seekers looked for returns to the exact forms of the New Testament church. Others sought to bestow divine gifts, authority. The greatest hunger was for spiritual gifts like dreams, visions, tongues, miracles, spiritual raptures, making the visionary the natural audience for the Mormon missionaries and the new revelation. The similarity, Carter, the son of Philip Libby Carter. So he comes to Provo, Orem in 1907. He actually drove the car, which is kind of like a little Model T Ford driving from Nauvoo, Missouri area out to Utah, and he stays over a month here, and he writes letters home. Here's what he wrote in a letter. By the way, do we have any descendants of us? Most of the time. So this is what he says. He says, I find all kinds of people among our relatives, all seemingly honest and well-meaning, but some educated and up to date, and others read and write their names. They have fine schools, however, and well attended, and the younger generation are faring better than their elders. These old Mormons have no use for doctors. They must send for the elders and have them lay on hands and administer the sacraments, and they claim the treatment cures when all doctors fail. Pearl Snow, who is about the all-around best posted woman that I ever met, who I am certain is honest as the day in defending her belief, tells of success that she has seen that are almost equal to raising the dead. I tell her that if I could see these things, I would be a Mormon, but as I came through Missouri, I adopted Missouri ways and have to be shown. So that's his letter. But if you make note, it kind of gives us a glimpse into the attitude of that early family, right? And we all know the story of Hannah being cured on the day of her baptism. And so you can kind of see between Dr. Bushman's concept of early converts in the 1830s to these people who are looking for visions and miracles and things like that to happen. And we just happen to fit into that.
Wasn't it John Hannah that said, well, that sure beats doctor's bills?
Yeah, well, that's later. We'll get to that. That's John when he said. So here's my working conversion thesis, and this also comes from Dr. Bushman. Belief in the Book of Mormon's conscious brothers. So, and this seems to be the case. I also miss John F. Boynton. He's so fly. That all this and then in June 18, and that's still, so that would be Thanksgiving time of 1831. 1832, Horace Cowan arrives at the Daniel Bean Senior Home and starts preaching. It's from his house that like the early missionaries were preaching from. Daniel Bean opened his house up to all sorts of religious ministers coming in. They're in Western Maine. News is not easy to get. And so any outsiders into the county, it's kind of like, now you know what's going on in the rest of the world because they're bringing news of the outside world, as well as proselyting. 16th of March, you see Daniel Bean Sr. dies, and then a week later, his son joins the church, okay? And Horace Cowan and he become missionary companions on that day, on his baptismal day, okay? And then if you know, if you look at the next line down, June of 1834, so about a year later, or a little over a year later, Dominicus Carter, Lydia Smith Carter are baptized. It doesn't give the exact date, but it does say that they are baptized in June, which is before Hannah, which is important to the story. So to me, like you've got Lydia, you got Dominicus Carter who are baptized, Hannah, the daughter, not the mother, and Aaron Neron York are also all baptized by Daniel Bean Jr. Okay, so he baptizes all of those people. Now, if you're thinking about this, Aaron Neron Yorks are part of the Beans. Okay, so you got that side. You got Lydia Smith, Dominicus's wife, who's also a Bean and a Smith that's being brought in. So it fits in with what Dr. Bush was saying. It's coming in through family lines and it's going through in-laws. And then Hannah Knight Libby Carter is apparently sick at the same time, and her official baptismal date was July 4th. And I'm not sure if it was actually Independence Day, but she was healed by the elders, and her husband, according to Eliza, the daughter, she would have been in her teens at this time. She's the one who records her father saying, "Well, that beats Dr. Bills." Okay. Then you have in the fall, William Furlsbury Carter, and probably his wife Sarah. Her birthday or her baptismal date doesn't give it exact, but I assume that they probably were baptized at the same time. They were baptized in November of 1834. Then Brigham Young shows up in Oxford in 1835, and he actually preaches from the Middle Vale Chapel, which is near the Carter home. Oh, by the way, also if you look at where the Carters live, Jonathan Smith, it goes Jonathan Smith, Dominicus's property, John Carter's property, and then Jonathan Smith's kids. They all live right next to each other. So Betsy Smith is living by her parents with Dominicus, and John Carter's in that mix too, okay? And so that's the chapel that they would have attended, is that Middle Vale Chapel. A year later, 1836, Brigham Young shows up again, and he shows up with William McClelland. And they preach the gathering, and they encourage the saints of the area to gather to Kirtland or to Missouri. And then you see several of the Carter kids immediately selling their property and leaving Newry and heading out to Ohio in 1836. So you've got Dominicus, so these are the siblings, Dominicus, Hannah, William, probably Eliza, they all go to Kirtland, and then you've got Dominicus and William going into Missouri Resilience Camp later.
John also went.
Yeah, I knew you would know, like, when John,
John H.
Okay.
Because they were both of age to be married. And obviously wanted to marry saints.
right,
They sent them along with the marriage to get married.
well, that makes more sense too, so yeah. Not in the picture is Philip. Philip is in Lowell, Massachusetts, working as a blacksmith in America's first factory town. So he is not in 1830 in Newry or Oxford. He has moved. He and his wife have moved on to Lowell, Massachusetts. So not just brothers and sisters, but cousins, in-laws, and uncles listed. So if you look, here's Ethel Smith III, Anna Betsy Bean, and they're tied to converts in Newry. So you got their kids on the left, but the known descendants, Betsy Smith, that's Daniel Bates' wife, Josiah Smith, which would be Betsy's brother. Then you've got Ethel Smith III's grandkids, which includes Lydia Smith, and then Lucy Meservey Smith, and I don't know how to say her middle name. Does anybody know about Lucy Meservey Smith? She becomes the wife to George Albert Smith. And anyway, and then you got David Smith. And then you got on the Jonathan Bean and Abigail Gordon ties, you've got their kids on the left there. And you got Daniel Bean Jr. who joins. And then you have Betsy Smith, who also would have been a kid. And then on the other side of my screen, was a little too small, so I can see it better. Their grandkids would include Juliet Ann Kilgore, who is the wife to Peregrine Sessions, which brings in the Session clan from that same area. Then you got Abigail Bean. Let's see, Aaron Neron York is also a grandson of Jonathan Bean and Abigail Gordon. Sarah York Carter is a granddaughter. Lucy Meserve Smith, and then Lucy Meserve Bean, and David Smith. And these all are joining the church at the same time. And so basically like I said, my thesis is that I feel, based off the record, that you've got Daniel Bean Jr. seems to be the main guy that's preaching, who gets paired with Horace Cowan, and it seems to go to him and then the Smiths. Side note, Lydia Smith's uncle was Josiah Smith in the area, and he was the branch president of Newry. He was made the branch president of that area. He and his wife never immigrated to Utah, but if you look, his daughter Lucy Meservey Smith is the one who married George Albert Smith, the apostle. And yeah, so it's interesting. You see all these ties and like how it went through. So just interconnected, but that's basically what I have. Any questions on that?
Well, I would just say it isn't a coincidence.
Right. Yep, not a coincidence. It's interesting how connected they actually are if you look at it. But then if you look at Newry's, census record of 1830. It's one page. There's not a lot of people. So,
The baptism of Richard Carter.
he is later, so most, and I should have gone into the other kids, but most of the other kids actually are 1840s. They are later, and it's kind of, at least that's the official record. Don't know if they, early church, they were baptized often. It was a sign of recommitment. So the church, if you go on family search, the earliest ordinance recorded is gonna be the one listed. So don't know if Richard was baptized at this time, or if he was later, like the Nauvoo period. So,
The young kids weren't really baptized.
right,
8 nowadays is standard. Not in those days, 12, 15, 16, 18
yeah,
was more common for baptisms.
For Richard Carter, he shows it. It was completed in the Provo Temple, 22nd of June, 1977.
That's because I couldn't find
so
it.
we should probably find a better record than I did. So, I assume he's a later kid. I assume it's the Nauvoo period is when
Well,
Richard.
he had to be baptized if he was endowed
Right,
in the Nauvoo Temple, so sometime prior to 1846, he was baptized.
That's correct.
well,
Nauvoo Temple, 7th of February, 1846.
so maybe that could have been his baptismal and the down. They were performing baptisms in December as well, so. Yeah, it's a possibility, so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? It's kind of fascinating when you look into it, like I said. Oh, yeah,
How far was that, the church? Because on John Carter's profile on Family Search, it shows a chapel. And you mentioned it was in another area. How far was that from your?
so they're in well, if you look at the area, you've been there, Bob, up in Newry. Like where the Newry Oxford, so you probably could say better, like, do you know where the chapel, that middle belt chapel?
They did not have the chapel in Newry. They
Right.
went to church down in Bethel.
Right,
Middlevale was another little community kind of between Bethel and Newry.
and that's what I understood.
Yeah, it's just a hillside.
How
You
far
take
was it?
Highway 2, when you go by Newry, it's to the west, and down the road a couple of miles where Middlevale was.
Is it, so about 4 miles from Bethel to Newry?
It's in between.
Yeah, it's kind of in between Bethel
So they had big.
and Newry. They're not really right between, kind of off to the side.
Yeah, and as far as my research, like it was kind of an open chapel for several different
Yeah, they had other
congregations.
religions there.
So
So
that makes more sense that Brigham Young's gonna be preaching from an unaffiliated building. Yes, do I think Hannah would have been baptized before the kids? I don't know, because I think Lydia and Dominicus are the first. I think it's Lydia and then Dominicus. Or probably.
I think Dominicus sent the missionaries.
Yeah, and Dominicus probably is the one who sent the elders to Hannah. They definitely heard them preach, because you gotta think, they're out in the middle of nowhere, they're farmers, and then when you have interesting people show up, you're gonna go and listen. So, they definitely would have heard the preaching, because Eliza's specific, they heard the preaching. If you wanna kind of get a better glimpse, go read Lucy D. Survey Smith. She actually wrote up the history, and that's on Family Search under her memories. She wrote up a history of how they joined the church, and you kind of get a little bit of puzzle pieces that come in that way. So, which elders were there and when.
Are these kids related to Willard Bean, the boxing missionary?
I don't know. It doesn't look like most, actually, if you look at Daniel Bean Jr., they don't seem to remain faithful to the church.
There are some good things.
Yeah, but I mean, like, as far as the last name, like, when I was looking at descendancy, Daniel Bean lives in Wisconsin. He serves in the Civil War. So he didn't stay with the church that long. Horace Cowan didn't stay. John Boynton was excommunicated. So like, it's kind of, I mean, if you look at it from that end, it's fascinating that our family stayed so faithful.
It stays so alive.
Yeah, so. Anyway, okay, any other comments or questions?